Hello. Oh. Hello, everybody. Today, I am going to be sharing with you my favorite books of 2020. I will not be ranking them because I don't feel like doing that. To me, these are all the best ones, the top tier. And I mean, as my mug literally says, all books are winners. Mugs available down below. In all honesty, this was a pretty strange reading year for me last year. I had a really solid reading year. I read a lot. This year, I really didn't read as much as I usually do. I think, okay, this is another thing I should address. I was gonna say, I think I read almost 30 books, and I might read 30 books by the time that the year comes to a close. And obviously, that's a great amount of books. There's no good amount, bad amount. It's all on our own personal scales. Let's not make it a giant stressful catastrophe. It's fun to do these yearly summaries, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't think of my reading as a yearly activity. I think of it as a lifelong activity. And in terms of my life's reading, it's going great. I'm doing a great job. But the thing I feel I must address is there's going to be people who are like, how are you doing your list? Like, I'm filming this, it's December 11th, I think. God, it's been a difficult and really tiring month. Okay, if I look bedraggled, it's because I'm bedraggled. I literally have sawdust in my hair and my hands are covered in paint. It's fine. I know that some people wait until the new year to do this video, and that's totally cool. In truth, I know I'm only gonna finish 2 or 3 more books, maybe, by the end of the year. I've got some great books to talk about here. I don't think any of the books I'm reading right now are gonna be like, they could be, but I don't think they're gonna be like the new favorites of my life. And if they are, I can just talk about them in January. It's fine. It's okay. Speaking of favorite books, do you want to find a new favorite book? Maybe our sponsor can help you with that. Today's video is brought to us by Book of the Month. Let's see what they sent me. Book of the Month is an online book service for readers. Their mission is to promote new and emerging authors and help readers discover books they will love. How it works is simple. Their team vets hundreds of books each month, and their subscribers can pick one of those 5 titles to enjoy. They have a really great skip policy, which means that if for any reason you need to skip a month, you can at no charge. Let's look at the books they have for December. Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford, A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham, The Holiday Swap by Maggie Knox, A History of Wild Places by Shea Earnshaw, Olga Dies Dreaming by Xochitl Gonzalez, and their add-on book this month is The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. And boy, is this the right month to try it out, because for December, if you use the code JOLLY in my link down below, you can get your first hardcover for $4.99. $5, ladies and gentlemen. Go and click it. Did you like that segue? I thought that was pretty good. Okay, let's jump into the books. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled to be talking to you about these books. Let's start here. These are all the same book. Book number 1 is Anne of Green Gables, and here's 4 different versions of Anne of Green Gables. So the last 2 years, I've really been having a moment with Anne, and I think that that moment is going to continue on into 2022. 2020, obviously, very difficult year, and in the summertime, I found myself comfort watching the Netflix show Anne with an E. The fact that that show was canceled, unacceptable. Literally have considered writing a letter to whoever the hell was responsible for canceling that show. Okay, I've said my piece. We'll move on. Anyways, I watched that show and it was so important to me. It really got me through a very difficult period. And so afterwards, I was like, I don't want to leave this world. So I rewatched it, but also I read this graphic novel last year. This is an adaptation of Anne of Green Gables, illustrated by probably my favorite illustrator of all time, Brenna Thumler. This is a gorgeous book. I will have already done overlays, but you can see this too. Super beautiful. I loved it. And I was like, Ariel, what are you doing? Read the frickin' book. So I read the book this year. So it's sort of been like for over a year, I've been immersed in this world of Anne. And then finally I read the novel. And I think that actually was a really lovely way, because by the time I finally read the book, I was so excited to know more about the characters. And it was like reading the book was filling in all these gaps. So this is a version I purchased a few years ago because it's a Canadian classic. I've wanted to read this for a long time, and I just didn't happen to read it as a kid. And then I ended up buying this version because this came in a box set, because it's an 8-book series, which people may not know. But that is why 2022 might be also the year of Anne, because I've got to keep going. I want to keep reading the books. But also, this is so cool. This is an Anne of Green Gables adaptation as well, but it's a manga adaptation, which is phenomenal. Just phenomenal. So I'm very excited to read that as well. But let me tell you what it's actually about, obviously. You probably know. It's a classic, but Anne of Green Gables is the story of an orphan, Anne Shirley. She's 11 years old, and she wasn't supposed to be adopted. It was a classic mix-up. There's an elderly brother and sister, Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert. God, it makes me emotional just talking about these characters. This is how much they mean to me. Marilla and Matthew, they work on a farm. They, neither of them are married. They've just always lived together in their family home, and they need help. So they wanted to adopt a son to help them on the farm. And instead, whoops, they got Anne. And Anne, first of all, is a girl, which, remember, this was written in the late 1800s. At the time, it was like, a girl? How is she going to help us on the farm? But that's kind of the point of the story, you know? The point of the story is like, Anne is amazing. She is wonderful. And it's, a story of them needing to save each other. Anne is going to help them, maybe not physically, like not through physical labor, but through warming their hearts with the joy of love. And then they're finally going to give her a home where she can grow up and be like, I genuinely feel like crying right now. It's a mixture of how powerful this story is, how much I love it, and how tired I am. Anyways, I love this series. I say series, I haven't read any of the other books, but I loved the first book. I loved the show. I loved this graphic novel adaptation. I'm going to keep reading the books. It'll probably take me a few years because I'm terrible at reading series. I'm not good at like finishing one and then instantly reading the next one, but I hope I can keep going. I've talked too much about Anne of Green Gables. Time to move on. I guess I'll keep going with novels. Should we move? No, well, okay, that was my classic section. Now we're going to go into, let's do my nonfiction section, because I think these are really cool. This one, I won't talk about this for very long. You've heard about Wild by Cheryl Strayed? Yeah, I'm late on this party. So interestingly, the first book I read by Cheryl Strayed is Tiny Beautiful Things. It was not Wild. And I read it because a friend of mine gave it to me, really recommended it to me. So I read that, I loved it. I love Tiny Beautiful Things. It's a phenomenal book. It's so good. Read Tiny Beautiful. I actually like Tiny Beautiful Things more than I like Wild. Not like way more, but just personally, I love that book. But this year, me and my best friend on our podcast, we decided to read this book together. So we read Wild, and it's great. It's great. I don't want to be cheesy. I don't want to talk about it too much because, like, the world knows that Wild is great. There's a reason why it's as famous as it is, and there's a reason why Reese Witherspoon starred in the movie, right? Like, it's a great story. It's a powerful story. But I just really love Cheryl Strayed. I think that this is actually a really phenomenal book, and if you haven't read it and you were kind of... Maybe this is why I wanted to talk about it, because, like, a lot of the time, books get so overhyped that I think a lot of readers actually don't want to read the book. Because they're like, oh, that's like popular books. I don't need to read that. No, you should. It's really, really good. It genuinely also made me want to like go hike the PCT. I don't think I would hike the PCT though. I'm more of like a backpack through Europe on the train system kind of a person. God, God, I want COVID to end. Okay. The next book is The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating by Elisabeth Tova Bailey. Oh my God, I have these great pictures to insert right here. So this was a book that I think somebody actually recommended to me through the podcast, maybe on Instagram. I don't really remember. But I'd heard of it before, so I was finally like, yeah, okay, I'll look that book up. This is like such a perfect read for me, but I have such a hard time recommending this book to people because I understand why a lot of people would find this boring. But bear with me. Stick with me. Hear me out. Maybe you'll like it. This is about a woman who, right at the beginning, is traveling. I forget where, but somewhere in Europe. And she gets an illness. She gets very sick. She has to cut her trip short. She goes home and she's getting all these symptoms. So she's like in the hospital getting tested. Nobody can figure out what the hell's going on. And so it's this like really mysterious sudden illness that has happened to her. She's trying to figure it out. And, you know, eventually she does find out kind of what is going on with her. But partly the book is about the struggle for diagnosis with kind of rare disease and rare chronic illness. And the second thing is it is a chronic illness, so it's not something that can be fixed or like has a cure. It's just her life has changed. She has to adapt to a new lifestyle. And it's about coming to terms with that and what her new life is like as a person who is often bedridden. And especially kind of that first period, like we're looking at the transition. Now, I think it's been like 12 years since this event, but the specific story, the nugget of what the story and all of that revolves around is how one of her friends had come to visit her at her house and had seen a little snail outside, and so picked it up and put it in a little planter pot and brought it into her and was sort of like, I thought you'd like this company. And the author, Elisabeth Tova Bailey, is like, I don't want a snail. And she's like, no, you'll like it. And she's like, no, please don't leave me the snail. And she's like, no, you'll love it. And she leaves. And she's like, now I've got this snail? I mean, what do I do? And she just watches the snail. This is what I'm talking about. It's kind of boring. But boring in a way I love. It's the slow simmer, baby. It's beautiful. It's a really beautiful story. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's not something I talk about often on my channel because, I don't know, it's a little personal. But I live with chronic pain. I'm always in pain. I'm in pain right now. My ankles are killing me. So it's really nice and interesting for me to read stories about people with chronic illnesses and chronic pain. It's something I was born with. It's something I've had since I was a kid. It's a sad moment to get diagnosed with something, but it's also a wonderful moment because you're like, I know what I have, and I can find a support system, and I can read about other people that have the same thing, and it's so validating when you type in the thing and then you type in a symptom and it's like, yeah, it's a common symptom, and you're like, I'm not alone. It makes sense a little bit, but it's also sad, and it's devastating, and it's isolating. So I love this book. I thought it was so good. If you have actually any recommendations about books about chronic illness or chronic pain, I would love your recommendations down below. Okay, let's do graphic novels. I'll finish off with novels. I mean, you guys can see that cover. What am I doing? This is terrible. Okay, 2 graphic novels. I love graphic novels, and this is a hill I'm willing to die on. I'm gonna keep prodding this dead horse. It's not dead. In fact, that's a bad metaphor because graphic novels are like more alive than they've ever been. Obviously, the art of comics goes back hundreds of years. If we want to talk about the caves of, what is it, Lascaux? I'm not going to talk about the history of depiction, but, you know, comics have been huge for a long time. And comic books, where kind of graphic novels were born out of a mixture of novels and newspapers and comic books, graphic novels, but they're just getting more and more popular. Like, it's such an exciting time to be into graphic novels because so much more is being printed. And these were just 2 of my favorites this year. And why I said I'm going to keep prodding this dead horse is because I recommend graphic novels a lot, and I know it's a hard sell. People that don't read graphic novels don't want to, but like not, I think they just, and I get it. I was there. Anywho, I started getting really hooked on them, and because they're so beautiful. They're also very quick to read. And now I'm realizing I went on some tangent and hadn't finished a thought I had been saying earlier in my introduction. I was talking about how I haven't read as much as I like to read in a year this year, because I've just felt so busy this year with renovating my house and doing other sorts of projects. And I think it's because I've moved into a new house and a new space, and it's a space I'm renovating, that for like a long time I didn't have an office. I didn't have a living room. So I don't have like that nice place to read. So that's definitely been an obstacle stopping me from reading very much this year. But that's another great reason why I love reading graphic novels, because I can read them so quickly. And that's not to say that I'm rushing through them. They just read pretty quickly because a lot of the reading is just looking at pictures. And I just love enjoying that illustration. I don't need to like sell you on graphic novels, but suddenly I felt that I should attempt to sell you on graphic novels. I feel like there is a little bit of elitism. It's like, oh, it's pictures. It's like, yeah, it's beautiful art that you get to just look at. Buy a graphic novel. Maybe one of these two. So these were two of my favorite ones that I read this year. The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill. This is definitely a children's book, but it's absolutely beautiful and sweet and cute. If you're into cottagecore, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? You need to get this. Kay O'Neill, they do beautiful, beautiful work. I've read other books by this author and illustrator, and they're really good. And this was just really sweet. I really enjoyed it. And then this other one, An Embarrassment of Witches by Sophie Goldstein and Jenn Jordan, is so funny. It was really silly and cute and sweet. And if you're looking for a book about witches, people love books about witches. This is sort of a weird book about witches because it's like they're not really witches. They're like in a witchy world, but because that's the norm, it's not really a witchy book. It's just about two women who just graduated from university and they're trying to get their first jobs and have good relationships. And it was refreshing, dare I say. Okay, we'll finish off with novels. Here we go. Here we go. I probably should have started with these to get the views, to get the watch time. God damn it, Ariel, the watch time. What am I talking about? So this first one, Kim Jiyoung, born 1982 by nam-joo. I read this book because of my friend, Monica Kim. I will link her channel down below. Beautiful videos. Everything about her is beautiful. You'll see. Go see her channel. You'll see what I mean. It's all just beautiful and pink. She recommended this a couple of times in different things. I saw her mention it, and we'd had a little conversation on Instagram about something, and she was recommending this book to me, and I was like, that sounds really good. I'll definitely check that out. And I'm so glad I did. It's so interesting. Okay. Wow, here we're going on another tangent. Ariel, god damn it. Okay. George Orwell, my favorite author. He's dead. He had this opinion that all art is political, and more importantly, it should be. That's why he wrote novels, because he wanted to be political. He wanted to use his art to have political purpose and push ahead his ideas and, warn us about things we should be worried about. And I feel like this is the first book I've read written in a fiction book that I've read written in recent times where that message really rang through. I kept thinking about what, like that idea that George Orwell had. Obviously, he's not the only one who has that idea, but I'm just, he's my favorite author, so I think of it in his work. It's so prevalent. This is a fiction book, but I've never seen this before. It has footnotes throughout it that are linking to nonfiction, to real life in the actual earth that we live in, studies and reports and statistics that back up what's happening in the fictional story. So our main character, Kim Jiyoung, born 1982, she's supposed to just symbolize like your average South Korean woman. Very ordinary. When she comes up against, for example, workplace harassment, there's then a footnote that's like, X percentage of women in South Korea experience sexual harassment in the workplace. And you're like, whoa, this is such an interesting blend of fiction and nonfiction. And what's also really interesting is just knowing that this book has made a really big impact in South Korea. So glad that it was translated into English so that we get access to that. It was phenomenal. It was really, really interesting. And this is really why you should trust your friends when they recommend you books, because they know you and they're sort of like, yeah, no, I think you'd like this book. By the way, did you see me check my microphone? Shout out to my patrons, because my microphone, it was a disaster. The other day my microphone broke. I had to drive all the way into the city, the big city, because I live in the middle of nowhere. So I had to drive into the big city and get this new expensive microphone, but it was okay because of my patrons. So thank you. Now we have a fancy lav mic. What do you think, guys? Our final book, The Ghost in the House by Sarah O'Leary. And then I'm going to go to bed. I clearly need it. I saw this randomly in a bookshop and I thought, ghost? Cool. And it was by a Canadian author. Where does she live? Probably Toronto. Montreal. What do you know? I went in not really knowing what to expect and I loved it. It was so good. So it's about this woman who wakes up and realizes she's a ghost. She's dead. And first of all, it takes her a while to figure that out. And so the more she comes to accept her situation, the more she comes to understand what's going on in the house. And she realizes she is in her house and her husband is still there, but 5 years have passed and he is actually remarried, or he's like about to remarry. And that's scary, right? Because she's like already freaked out that she's dead, but now she's also freaked out because she's now living kind of in the house where her husband has a new wife. What? And so not only is this a book, this is what's so cool about it. Not only is this a book about ghosts and accepting your death, it's a book about like letting go of a relationship and accepting that the world has changed without you. It was beautiful. It made me cry, which never happens. I never cry when I read. I cry a lot like when I watch movies. Or music lately is really making me cry a lot. But this really, it did. It made me cry maybe twice. I loved it. These were many of the books I loved this year. No. I have really enjoyed sharing these with you. I am super looking forward to reading next year. You know what? This book has betrayed me many times. It's really slippery, okay? And every time I try and use it for a thumbnail or for a photo on Instagram, it betrays me. So I'll put it at the top. As I was saying, I'm really excited about reading next year. I have some fun goals planned, and if you want to hear those, check out my book podcast. Every year, at the end of the year, we do a bigger wrap-up than what I've just said, so I'll talk about these books because they were my favorites, but I'll also talk about, my favorite covers and a lot of my reading statistics, breakdowns. Did I achieve the challenges I set out for myself at the beginning of the year? And then we'll have another episode that'll come out where I talk about all of my reading resolutions for 2022 and if I have any challenges or goals. And I do, and I think they're fun. Down in the comments below, definitely let me know what your favorite book of the year was. I'd love to know. We can do a little repository of great books in the comments, and let me know if you've read any of these, or maybe if you would consider adding one of these books to your 2022 TBR pile. Thank you to Book of the Month for sponsoring this video. Like I said, thank you so much to my patrons for helping me out. And also thank you so much to everyone who's purchased the merch. I can't believe the sweaters sold out, and thankfully we have a new batch of them in. If you're interested in the I'm Thinking About Book sweater, it's got the little tiny book on the sleeve. I mean, it's embroidered. Come on. I will leave the link to it down below if you want to grab it. There are only a few left, so I recommend grabbing it soon if you want it for the winter time. And people keep asking me about the size. So I'm currently wearing an extra large, and I should have gotten a large. Like, I like things baggy, like it feels pretty giant on me. So do with that information what you will. Also, people keep asking me how tall I am. I'm 5'8". I am 5'8". Okay. I always wanted to be 5'10", and that dream didn't come true. But I'm 5'8", and that's still pretty tall, actually. Goodbye now. There was a weird energy in this video.